I would like to welcome everybody to this memorial service where we're honoring our dear friend, Eleanor Hutchens. I think most of the people here knew her personally, and so you will be so charmed to know that the program is mostly written by Eleanor. She was a prolific writer and speaker, and she kept everything that was written on paper, and the other paper lover, guided by the archivist, has saved everything and organized it. And I was able to go through and find so many beautiful things that she wrote, and they are complemented with passages from the Baha'i writings. So I hope you enjoy the program, and afterwards we will have refreshments and celebrate Eleanor.
This first reading is an essay that Eleanor wrote and read on WILL, the local, well, I guess it's PBS, isn't it? NPR radio station in 1966. It's called Our Ephemeral Lives. A species of mayfly, after several years of underwater existence, one afternoon crawls up a reed, breaks out of its shell, spreads its wings, and flies aloft for an evening. It is dead by morning. One of man's haunting thoughts is that his life is fleeting, not much longer than that of an ephemera. He is born, grows through a confusing childhood to adult stature, goes to work, raises a family, perhaps, and in a few short decades at most, he is dead. The poets and artists, the thoughtful and sensitive ones in our midst, have this awareness, but so do the scientists who measure the ages of rocks and the distances of stars. Jesus, who was the Christ, warned us of what is important in our brief lives and what has no importance. He said in Luke 12:15-21, "Take heed and beware of all covetousness, for a man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions." And he told them a parable, saying, "The land of a rich man brought forth plentifully, and he thought to himself, 'What shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops.' And he said, 'I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build larger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Take your ease, eat, drink, be merry.' But God said to him, 'Fool, this night your soul is required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be?' so is he who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. This warning is repeated in all of the books of God. Baha'u'llah, who identified his words with the words of the prophets who went before him through the Holy Spirit which flowed through them, who said that his faith was the changeless faith of God, eternal in the past, eternal in the future, in Gleanings also said, "Rejoice not in the things ye possess. Tonight they are yours, tomorrow others will possess them. Thus warneth you he who is the all-knowing, the all-informed. The days of your life flee away as the breath of the wind, and all your pomp and glory shall be folded up as were the pomp and glory of those before you. Reflect, O people. What hath become of your bygone days, your lost centuries? Happy the days that have been consecrated to the remembrance of God, and blessed the hours which have been spent in praise of him who is the all-wise." That's Gleanings 138. What is the purpose of these reminders in the Holy Scriptures if it is not to help man to distinguish between what perishes and what is eternal? How do we become rich towards God, as Christ suggests, so that we will not be like the man in the parable who took pride in his possessions? We must keep an awareness that life is brief, but this is not enough. We must remember the assurance that our souls are everlasting, and we can grow and develop through our awareness of the greatness and majesty of God, through our worship of him, through our coming to love him and our wish to serve him and to obey his laws. The greatest and most direct source of our awareness is the Scriptures, of course. Also, daily work itself could be transformed into worship when we devote it to the services of our fellow men. Today, I'd like to suggest a third source of worship, an awareness in the discoveries of science about a universe which grows more marvelous with every probe into the infinitely small or the infinitely great. For instance, this month's Scientific American, she cites January 1966, tells of the method whereby an Australian scientist, John Cairns, recorded the process of duplication of a single-cell bacterium, Escherichia coli. Oh, it says pronounced Escherichia coli. Those of us who think of a single cell as being a simple cell are baffled and awed by Mr. Cairns telling us that the genetic inheritance in the chromosome of that one cell in its DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, is 6 million nucleotide bases. At the same time that we are impressed with the mental capacity of the scientists and with his technical skill in capturing a record of the process and in analyzing the steps, we are inspired by what must be the intricacy of man's physical inheritance when we learn that the duplication of that one-celled bacterium is 20 minutes meant the unwinding of atom chains at the rate of 15,000 revolutions per minute. At the other extreme, astronomers are increasing our awe at the universe through findings made by their new equipment. Remember that the Old Testament psalmist felt awe without even a telescope. Our own Milky Way, the galaxy in which our solar system has its place, is now visualized as being made up of some 100 billion stars arranged in a number of streamers extending from a central hub, forming a spiral that is rotating at great speed, but which is so large that 250 million years are needed for a single revolution. Light, which takes 8 minutes to travel the 93 million miles between the sun and our Earth, takes 100,000 years to cross our galaxy. But we are told that even our present 200-inch telescope on Mount Palomar could photograph a billion galaxies. These findings of science may help some of us to glimpse the grandeur of the universe being created by God. In a prayer, Baha'u'llah exclaimed, "How can I claim to have known thee when the entire creation is bewildered by thy mystery? And how can I confess not to have known thee when, lo, the whole universe proclaimeth thy presence and testifieth to thy truth?" Also from Gleanings, number 63. We reach beyond the fragile and ephemeral in our lives when our worshiping hearts turn toward God, the creator of galaxies, whose compassion is aware of the fall of a sparrow, and whose love is the sustainer of all men in this world and in the next.
This next essay, written by Eleanor, is somewhat of a semi-biographical tale of her husband, Bob. The ideal teacher? Robert Hutchens had taught himself to read. He had been read to and would lie on the floor going over the story. "Mother, what is this word?" "Backward." When he was 5.5, he went to first grade in Fairbury, Illinois. In 1918, Miss Stern knew exactly what children need: conformity, drill. She soon had Robert on the front row. Whenever he held a pencil in his left hand, she put it in his right hand, over and over. Not left hand, but right hand. So Bob, to this day, writes with his right hand, but does many other things left-handed. For reading, all together, sound out: B, B, B for B, box. Robert would turn the page of his book and read ahead. Miss Stern came down and shook him. "Stay with the class." When that happened a couple of times, he decided to run away from school. He drank several dippers of water and at recess started walking south. Along the road there was a slag pile that was attractive. He was too little to slide on it, but no reason not to today. No one was going to boss him around anymore. He found a flat board and slid down 4 times. It rained, but he kept going. He looked at cows in a pasture. He looked over a bridge to watch a creek. Were there any fish? Crawdads? He kept walking south. He was hungry, but there was no food around. He didn't have any money. He rested and kept going. It was dark, but he kept walking. Finally, he decided his own bed would feel good. He turned around and started to walk north. At about 2 a.m., he opened his front door, saw his folks sitting up for him, but didn't say anything, just went up to his room to bed. The next morning, his father woke him up. "Time to get ready for school." "I'm not going to school anymore." Nothing more was said. His father was a high school teacher. He did some investigating of the first grade. The next day, Robert was put in 3rd grade.
This next is an excerpt from a 1975 holiday greeting from the Hutchens family. "We are thinking of you and hoping that the past year was a good one for you and that the year to come will be an even better one for you and for the world that we share. We are looking forward to messages from you. How are you? What are you doing? What are you thinking? How are other members of your family? Might you be coming through to see us? We welcome you."
Mother and the Grapes by Barbara Casterline. When my daughters Laura and Edith and my sister Stephanie too were very little, Mother took us all to pay a call on an elderly Baha'i. The lady was not wealthy, but wanted to entertain us. so she served each of us a glass of water and a bunch of tiny green grapes. Now those grapes were already half rotten, and I didn't want to tell her so. What to do? I ate the green part of each grape, leaving the brown part. The little girls, also without saying anything, just left the grapes on their little plates. What did Mother do? Just ate her grapes, every single one. Later, I commented to her about the fact that she had bravely eaten grapes that were rotten. "Oh, were they?" she said. "I didn't notice." And it's true. She didn't notice that the grapes her friend gave her were rotten. She didn't notice things like that. I can never be like her, but I can admire her. In loving memory, Barbara.
To live the life is to be no cause of grief to anyone, to be kind to all people, and to love them with a pure spirit. Should opposition or injury happen to us, to bear it, to be as kind as ever we can be, and through all, to love the people. Should calamity exist in the greatest degree, to rejoice, for these things are the gifts and favors of God. To be silent concerning the faults of others, to pray for them and to help them through kindness to correct their faults. To look always at the good and not at the bad. If a man has 10 good qualities and one bad one, to look at the 10 and forget the one. And if a man has 10 bad qualities and one good one, to look at the one and forget the 10. Never to allow ourselves to speak one unkind word about another, even though that other be our enemy. To do all our deeds in kindness. To cut our hearts from ourselves and from the world. To be humble. To be servants of each other, and to know that we are less than anyone else. To be as one soul in many bodies, for the more we love each other, the nearer we shall be to God. But to know that our love, our unity, our obedience must not be by confession, but of reality. To act with cautiousness and wisdom. To be truthful. To be hospitable. To be reverent. To be a cause of healing for every sick one, a comforter for every sorrowful one, a pleasant water for every thirsty one, a heavenly table for every hungry one, a star to every horizon, a light for every lamp, a herald to every one who yearns for the kingdom of God. Abdul-Baha.
This next selection is an excerpt of a letter from an ailing friend of Eleanor's. Dear Eleanor, love and greetings to you. How is your wonderful family? I think of you all so much and the good times I had with you. I do miss my Baha'i activities, so I decided I would write some notes and perhaps pick up some activity I could do. I haven't written letters for a couple of years, but feel equal to writing some now. I hope you will find the time to write me, Eleanor, and pray for me. I've been confined to bed and wheelchair for over a year, cancer in the bone of the hip. I get x-rays again there the 1st of July, and I hope it will show improvement so I can walk a bit. I would be so thankful to be able to walk a bit at home. If I could only do that, it would be wonderful. Please pray for me. Harriet.
Eleanor writes, our mother instilled a love of nature in us. In 1926, when my father was on sabbatical and wanted to write his thesis, he bought a farm near Fithian which had a stream and woods and cornered on the Salt Fork River. When he died that fall, Mother knew she couldn't keep the farm, which was heavily mortgaged. But she took us out in April to enjoy one more spring and summer there. There were mertensia bluebells, red columbine, Dutchman's breeches, dogtooth violets in the woods that spring, and weekends we'd go out beside the stream to an old oak tree and eat the lunch Mother packed. If we drank our milk, she let us wade in the stream and try to catch crawdads in our tin cups. As we walked along, she named every tree, every bird, every flower. That summer we had a swing in the pasture under the sassafras trees. There was a trickle of a stream there too, with wild blue iris growing in a curve. Some days she took us along a different path, past wild rose bushes to the river for our picnic. My brothers were alert for Indian arrowheads and hatchets. There was a slope with pebble outcropping where I found crinoids and called them Indian beads. That summer was idyllic.
The astronomer, Dr. Greenstein, says, "We leave out so many real questions. Why is there any matter? Why is there as much as there is and not more? How did matter come to be?" He says, "I'm not a theoretician, and these questions make me philosophically unhappy. Either it began at one time, in which case you look for the finger of God, or it goes up and down, which is sort of boring." This is the trouble with cosmology. It is that it's incomplete, it's philosophically unsatisfying, and it always leads to ultimate questions which are outside science. There's an interesting passage in the Lincoln Barnett's The World We Live In that was published by the Life staff a long time ago, and it had these beautiful full-page pictures, the story of life on Earth. And he is talking about the intellectual power of man on Earth. Today it seems incredible he ever penetrated the disguises of the physical world at all. To his eye, the earth is flat. The ground on which he works seems stationary. How did he find himself clinging to the surface of a sphere, spinning about its axis at 1,000 miles an hour, whirling around the sun at 20 miles a second, riding through space on the rim of the Milky Way at 170 miles a second, slipping and sliding, wobbling and dipping among the stars, and half a dozen other intricate motions? Another way of expressing the same idea. Max Gunther was writing in the Saturday Evening Post, and he says, in a near infinitive of burning stars and black space so enormous that it absolutely cannot be imagined, on a speck of rock so small that to mention it seems almost ridiculous, tiny creatures called men are trying to find out where they are. They have a name for this vast, star-dusted endlessness in which their planet drifts. They call it the universe. They have learned a little about it, but only enough to make them wonder all the more. Where did it come from? Where is it going? What is it? The psalmist said in the 100th Psalm, "Make a joyful noise unto the Lord, all ye lands. Serve the Lord with gladness. Come before his presence with singing. Know ye that the Lord, he is God. It is he that hath made us, and not we ourselves. We are his people and the sheep of his pasture. Enter into his gates with thanksgiving and into his courts with praise. Be thankful unto him and bless his name. For the Lord is good, his mercy is everlasting, and his truth endureth to all generations." Baha'u'llah says that every created thing in the whole universe is but a door leading unto his knowledge, a sign of his sovereignty, a revelation of his names, a symbol of his majesty, a token of his power, a means of admittance in his straight path. And in another place in Gleanings, center your thoughts in the well-beloved rather than in your own selves. These are just a few of the qualities of God. As we read that he is the powerful, the Almighty, that he is our refuge, that he is the loving, that he is our friend and our companion. And in one place we are told that he is closer to us than we are to our own selves. And the explanation for that is that we are not always aware of our spiritual selves, while God is always aware of that spirit within us.
I desire distinction for you. The Baha'is must be distinguished from others of humanity, I do not desire for you financial distinction, not scientific, commercial, industrial distinction. For you I desire spiritual distinction. That is, you must become eminent and distinguished in morals. In the love of God, you must become distinguished from all else. You must become distinguished for loving humanity, for unity and accord, for love and justice. In brief, you must become distinguished in all the virtues of the human world, for faithfulness and sincerity, for justice and fidelity, for firmness and steadfastness, for philanthropic deeds and service to the human world, for love toward every human being, for unity and accord with all people, for removing prejudices and promoting international peace. Abdu'l-Baha.
And next, another excerpt from Eleanor's autobiography, The Autobiography of a Happy Person. Faith, what first appealed to me in the Baha'i faith was the principle of progressive revelation. The prayers, the teachings, the scriptures brought by the 19th century leaders, the Bab and Baha'u'llah, had both individual aids to devotion and social principles for the establishment of peace, world unity. I became a Baha'i when I was 16. That was 1934. Religion is of little value unless it affects the way one lives. Because the Baha'i faith taught that our vision should be world-embracing, not confined to our own selves, because Baha'u'llah said that the earth is but one country and mankind its citizens, I've tried to read about other peoples, and when there was an enmity expressed in the newspapers, tried to compensate by reading as much as I could about the people behind the barrier raised by prejudices. We've done some traveling, but before that became economically possible, we enrolled in the Host Family Project for international students, always having someone that we could learn from and teach about our American family life. Our associations continued with former students from Japan, Turkey, Indonesia, India, Venezuela, and Thailand. It is hard for one person to make much of an impact on society, but those who have similar ideas can combine to influence the thinking of others. The Baha'i stress on the need for eliminating all prejudices, for bringing about justice for all, drew my attention early to the relations between blacks and whites in this country. When I was in college, there was no restaurant on campus where Negroes could eat. I took part in an effort by the cabinet members of the YMCA and YWCA to go with Negro classmates to campus eating places. I took a girl from my history class to eat in Smith Drugstore one noon. We weren't waited on. Instead, that menu be brought and we ordered. Food was not brought. When I complained, the food came, but it was very highly salted so that it was inedible. It didn't occur to me that anyone I knew would notice my sitting in that restaurant with a black girl. But my fiance was very much put out because one of his friends taunted him that I would rather sit with a Negro for lunch than with him. The house mother of my sorority was asked by the sisters to talk to me about the impropriety of my behavior. That almost ended my engagement and my sorority life. How dare either interfere with what I thought was the right thing to do? Interracial matters continued to interest me. When we came back to the Twin Cities after the war, I joined with others in 2 groups that tried to right wrongs. One was the Employment on Merit Committee, which interviewed many stores and businesses to try to open up opportunities for economic advancement. Before that, there were jobs available for blacks in domestic service and as cooks or custodians for fraternity and sorority, but few others. Another group was formed for freedom of residence, which went to realtors to try to break the gentleman's agreement that houses for blacks would only be shown in the north central part of the 2 towns. It took a number of years for either effort to bear fruit. About 1960, several members of Toastmistresses Club, when we found that the club was not open to black friends, started our own social group, which came to be called Speechmates, an interracial, international, interreligious group that met twice a month to eat together and share memories and ideas. At a time when I was housebound, caring for my husband's 92-year-old mother, black and white women and their friends, eventually from 18 countries, met in my home to drink coffee, visit, and make cancer dressings. Little by little, I tried to get to know people and to eradicate all prejudices that our society has insinuated into my consciousness. When I learned of customs that are taken for granted, but that hurt others, I tried to change them, at least in my own behavior.
Next, Barbara remembers her mother. Barbara says, I remember most of all Mother's warm smile, embracing everyone around her in her love. I remember that she didn't care what color someone's skin was, what country they were from, whether they were rich or poor, well-educated or not, old or young. All those things made no difference to her. She loved everyone and showed her love in actions. She would drive the old ladies of our town to the Baha'i meeting. She would visit people who were lonely. She would listen on the phone while people told her their troubles. When I was a child, we often had foreign students at our dinner table, and Mother took me when I was little to a service at what was then called the African Methodist Church, and gave a talk there in the Sunday school about polishing the mirror of the heart. I still remember that she used a real mirror. She took me to a synagogue once too when I was in elementary school. I understand from something she wrote that way back in 1939 or so, long before the Civil Rights Movement, she and an African American friend sat down at the lunch counter of a local drugstore waiting to be served. They waited over an hour. Perhaps that was the first sit-in. I remember how she kept up a correspondence with Baha'is all around the world, how straight she stood, how she gave talks at the House of Worship, at Toastmasters Club, at Baha'i public meetings all around our state, and how when the Toastmasters Club refused to accept her nomination of an African American woman to join, she and Edith Osborne quit and started a new club, that would be open to any race or nationality and where there was no speech criticism. She made change happen, change for the better. I remember how she laughed at my dad's jokes, no matter how many times he had told the same ones. How she made the most delicious and nutritious vegetable soup from the vegetables in our garden, the most delicious pot roast, homemade noodles to boil with chicken. How she taught a Baha'i children's class for me and the neighbor children, and we learned to sing, God is like a father, good and kind and true. God is like a mother taking care of you. I remember how when I cried, and I cried a lot, She would wipe the tears from my face with her hands. The soothing touch of her hands on my face will always be with me. It's with me now. May my mother's love remain with all of you here now. Love, Barbara.
Of the virtues with which ye have been endowed, neither be neglectful of your high destiny. Suffer not your labors to be wasted through the vain imagination which certain hearts have divided. Ye are the stars of the heaven of understanding, the breeze that stirreth at the break of day, the soul flowing waters upon which must depend the very life of all men, the letters inscribed on the sacred scroll with the utmost unity and in the spirit of perfect fellowship. Exert yourselves, exert yourselves, that ye may be enabled to achieve that which best seemeth this day. This day of God. Ye are the stars of the heaven of understanding, the breeze that stirreth at the break of day, the song flowing waters upon which must depend the very life of all men, the letters inscribed on the sacred scroll. Whoso is worthy of so high calling, let him arise, oh, let him arise. Whoso is worthy of so high calling, let him arise, oh, let him arise. Ye are the stars, the heaven of understanding, the breeze that stirreth at the break of day, the soft flowing waters upon which must depend the very life of all men, the letters inscribed on the sacred scroll. The letters inscribed upon the sacred scroll. The letters inscribed upon the sacred scroll.
Well, I feel certain Eleanor would just love that rendition. It's the end of the program. I'd like to thank several people for years. Amy helped with a lot of different types of things. Sean, Zivar. My mom is the archivist. She made these beautiful displays for you to enjoy. Along the back wall, Eleanor was a beautiful painter. There's some art of hers back there by the refreshments and another piece up here. And there's some things that she wrote. here and there, and her photo albums are over there. I hope that you'll look at those and sign the guest book, and thank you for coming. But it's not over. We have a wonderful donation from Ruth Mock. Ruth Mock was a member of the Fortnightly Club with Eleanor. This is a copy of Gleaned from the Writings of Baha'u'llah, a beautiful version of it. It says, in memory of Eleanor Hutchens May 2015. Ruth, would you mind coming up and just giving us a brief explanation of what the Fortnightly Club was and what you did?
What it is, it's still in existence,
Yes.
and it's meeting tomorrow. And I
it
want to
says
take
here,
back,
it was founded in 1895.
it's one of the oldest women's clubs in Champaign-Urbana. It's still just only women too, but it was it was founded, as I understand it, so people could give talks, learn to speak in public on various topics, and well, when they first started meeting, you know, they wore hats and hose and gloves. We don't do that anymore. Gradually giving that up. But fortnightly. Well, now we only meet once a month, and we meet at the Windsor Savoy. It used to be in homes, and it used to be in restaurants. But how I got into, well, no, it's how I got into Speechmates. I was a very good friend of Helen Pollock Folk, whose sister was Edie Pollock Osborne, who along with Eleanor started Speechmates. And I really enjoyed the Speechmates, and I'm listening today to all of these things. I realized it gave me an opportunity to know a lot of African American women personally through Speechmates. Oh, and then could I add one thing about, I think, what you read about her husband? He came one night to Speechmates and gave this talk about when he was in the military, and he was in the South Pacific, and he was in charge of a ship. When they got and the ship's orders were to go to Japan, that was their next assignment. And he said that when they got the orders, he must have been asleep below, because he went up on top and danced with the crew in his skivvies. That's an old-fashioned term, I think. Skivvies. He was so happy not to have to go to Japan with his crew. Speechmates. I think that Billy, what was her last name that was
Campbell.
the Campbell. She, when she moved to Nashville, my friend Walter and I were in Nashville about just a couple of years afterwards, and were able to visit her. She had a very, very nice apartment. She really did. It's as nice as the ones we have at Windsor, the Savoy, where I live now. And she seemed to be very settled in there. What else? Speechmates. Oh, the book. I might talk a little bit about this book. Fortnightly, whenever we lose a member, they like to give a book in honor of the member. So I asked Carlton, who I see frequently at Ollie, Osher Lifelong Learning on campus, I asked him about a book. And this is the one that he suggested and bought for me to bring to you today. So that's how.
Ruth has put the
Fortnightly
Fortnightly Club frontispiece on there for us.
That Eleanor was a member of for years. Yeah.
Ruth, I'm so happy that you came. I know we all are. We're looking forward to chatting with you during the refreshments and
Thank you.
hearing some more of your stories about Eleanor. And also, Chuck, did you
Janie,
want to
you
say
have
something?
that plate there in the front,
Yes.
and I just happened, when you opened up and showed it, I thought of something that a friend of mine had some of these made for his books, and I loved it. He says, all of my friends are very poor accountants, but they're outstanding bookkeepers.
Oh. And wasn't that true of Eleanor? Because the few times I was in her house, there was one whole room of nothing but books.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
And they were
Books.
stacked everywhere.
They were stacked everywhere.
Yes.
Yeah.
my mother and I, when Eleanor and Bob were gonna be moving from their house to the assisted living, Stephanie asked for help, and my mom and I helped get the house in some sort of organization so that estate sale people could come in and organize for the estate sale. You know, and they had put an addition on that house just for the library, and I think she said there were like 6,000 books in there. And they weren't, the shelves went from the floor all the way to the ceiling, but then there were stacks also of books everywhere. So. In her autobiography, someone asked her, have you read all these books? And she said, some of them more than once.
But then when she moved into the assisted living, didn't she take a lot of books with her?
Yes, she did.
A lot of books with her. But she just couldn't give up.
She loved her books.
Yeah.
She and Bob both.
Yeah.
My all-time favorite illustrator is N.C. Wyeth, the father of Andrew Wyeth, who many people remember from the famous painting of the woman out in the field. And when Eleanor decided to move, she sold a lot of her books, and I got a treasure trove of original books with N.C. Wyeth's paintings in them, and they are marvelous. She sold them for $2 a piece, worth much more than that. How generous.
Well, I don't know where Zivar is. Zivar is in charge of refreshments, and that's what's going to happen next. That and mingling. Be sure and check out the displays, too. I think you'll enjoy them very much. Eleanor's brother's arrowheads are over there. As you mentioned in your story, her arrowheads are there.
That's the way it used to be. I love that phrase. And by that time, she was, what, 90 years old?
I guess for me, I'm Sean Mills. My memory of Eleanor that I would want to relate is children's classes, because when I was a child, she was generally the host of our children's classes. And I just remember her, sometimes she was a teacher. I don't have a lot of strong memories of her as a teacher, but I do have very strong memories of her as a hostess, where she would be running the children's classes in one room, and we call now the youth and the junior youth in another room, and the adults would be in another room, and there would be guests, and there would be refreshments, and there would be music, and she was tirelessly running this entire affair, and there'd be 20, 30 people in the house. And I just remember it feeling flawless, like this was the way things were run. And that's something that I miss a lot, but whenever I think of Eleanor, I always think of that. I always think of being a child in that house, which was basically a museum anyway, so it was amazing just to walk around.
Yeah, well, that's what it's right in the...
And the games, she had a lot of games.
Amy Smith Felty. I became a Baha'i in Champaign-Urbana in 1968, and Eleanor was one of the members of the local spiritual assembly of the Baha'is of Urbana. So she was one of the people who helped deepen me. I remember Eleanor for so many things, not just Baha'i things, but she and Billy Campbell took me to speech makes regularly. And I remember going and being amazed that all of these wonderful women were talking together in an integrated group. They enjoyed one another's company, and they all clearly loved Eleanor and Billy and the other Baha'is. Lucille Terry was there too. I remember Eleanor having us over to her house often. The whole Baha'i club at the University of Illinois would come for potlucks and come for dessert things and come for holy day meetings. And it was just a wonderful time. Eleanor and Bob were gracious hosts, and they had a beautiful home on Vawter Street in Urbana that we loved to go to.
I'm Marilyn Rickey. I have met Eleanor about 3 times, and I was very impressed with her during those times. I became Baha'i 10 years ago, and I would be here in Champaign occasionally visiting my daughter, and would come to the center to visit. And the 2 times I came, there were a lot of people here, but everybody seemed to be very busy. However, I sat down, and there was this lovely lady that was sitting there quietly, beautiful smile, and she talked to me. When everybody else was busy doing their thing, this woman, who was Eleanor, took the time to talk to me. I met her again at a unit convention, and again, she was somebody who simply impressed me as a lovely woman with a beautiful smile who took the time to talk to me. So even though I did not know her long, did not know her well, as a new Baha'i at the time, she very much impressed me, and I'm glad that I had that brief opportunity to know her.
While, like, only very recently, now that I've been meditating on her life and what I knew about her, do I realize that after she moved away, the parties became less festive. And I served on a holy day committee with her for a year once. She was just really sweet. I met her when she was just slow and sweet, but still managed to do a lot.
Right.
Well, I was hoping to get something about Eleanor. Something you missed?
Well, I enjoyed the parties in her yard. It was wonderful for the kids, and the fact that they were growing things just was impressive to this generation of kids, because everybody lives in an apartment and they may have a few flowers, but Eleanor had a Japanese garden in the back and a vegetable garden on the side yard, and her husband worked very hard to try to keep everything going, and lots of picnic areas where she would serve, and maybe with help of other people, lots of picnic food for the gatherings. So when there was a holy day at Eleanor's, we were there. We didn't miss too many of those.
My name is Amy Eves. I became a Baha'i in Urbana, and Eleanor was one of the people who helped to deepen me. And the times when I was living away from here and isolated, she would call every now and then just to see how I was. And she was a great listener. She would listen to whatever was happening in my life. And she had an enormous effect on me. And I feel richly blessed to have known her.
My name is Ann Croft, and I remember Eleanor Hutchens from many years ago in the 70s when our daughter went to school here at the U of I.
Well, I'm Sid Lunsford, and I live in Champaign. And I knew Eleanor. I first met her in the 80s, and then when I moved to Champaign in 2004, I saw her more often. And our connection was through art, and she always encouraged me. She always wanted to see anything that I'd done. She always wanted me to mail her things. When she moved to Florida, she wanted me to email her any copies of anything I worked on. Occasionally I would go to her house and we would sit and talk about art. She would give me some artists' magazines to take home and look at. She was just always about art, and our relationship was about art. The last thing that I remember was seeing her in the Baha'i Center here, and we just touched foreheads. It's something I always remember. It was just such a wonderful feeling of friendship. It was just something we never said a word. We just touched foreheads together. It was quite something I really remember.
My name is Karen Lavaza, and what I would like to say about Eleanor is she not only had a lot of books and loved a lot of books, but we had 4 daughters, my husband Bob Quillen and I, and she gave each one of our daughters a book when she graduated high school, so 4 books, and it was the complete writings and talks of Abdul Baha. So that was a precious gift that she gave to our daughters. And so she was a very generous person, loved her dearly.
I'm Zivar Baker when Eleanor knew me. When I was little, Eleanor and Bob were Mr. and Mrs. Hutchens. And I remember when I was about 15 that I said something to Eleanor and such Mrs. Hutchens, and she said, "Don't call me Mrs. Hutchens anymore, you have to call me Eleanor." And it was about 6 months or so before I could talk to her again, because every time I tried I couldn't get out Eleanor. She was Mrs. Hutchens. But she was very encouraging and very interesting. And one thing I remember, she always had, in the summertime, coxcomb flowers. They're an unusual flower-like plant structure, and just real unusual and pretty.
My name is Dottie Fry. I knew Eleanor from the time I moved here in 2001, and so I didn't have a long number of years to be with her like some of the people here, but we became good friends and we'd go out to lunch together, and I would visit her in her home. And the thing that I remember so much about Eleanor was there were so many qualities. Her kindness, especially, her kindness to everybody, her generosity. When we would have a fundraiser, she would bring her checkbook, and she didn't care what was offered. She was ready to buy it and to contribute to the fund. She loved everybody. I am mystified by that ability to immediately love people. And one thing I found out from working with her papers, and I worked in the archives here at the center, is that there were times when she would write down the qualities that she wanted to learn herself, and even had a chart saying, when she could consciously do these things and remind herself to do these things. She was always working. She was working on herself. She had such a voracious love for books and for music and for learning in general. Just an amazing woman. And it was such a pleasure to put together an exhibit of her work. I have one of her paintings which I treasure, and I think of her so often and miss her very, very much.
Hi, I'm Halim Bir. I live in Urbana, and I remember Eleanor at a few meetings. I didn't know her personally, but I remember seeing her at a few meetings, and I wanted to come to her memorial, and it's clear to me now that I've found out more of her life and what she did, that really she's almost a saint. Saint Eleanor, the things that she did and the services the things that she did for her community, and the things with the speech mates, and especially with racial tensions and how she alleviated those tensions in her day and age. It's just something that I found phenomenal, and I was very impressed. And I'm very glad I came to the memorial service to learn about her life.
We're in the car driving around looking for more experiences.
Yeah, we've seen quite a few Baha'is today.
We sure have. It's gotten pretty good so far, I think so.
I hope everyone's getting to know people just a little bit better than they have in the past.
Which is our goal. And we're just driving around. What? Hey, look! Hey, that's Eleanor.
Eleanor Hutchens?
Eleanor Hutchens.
Stop the car, Barnum. Stop the car.
I'm stopping the car. Let's go see what she's doing. Oh, this is great. Let's go.
It's Eleanor Hutchens, everyone.
Eleanor.
How are you doing today, Miss Hutchens?
Well, I'm just looking for someone to play with.
You're looking for someone to play
Well,
with?
I need practice.
You need practice? Do you come out here and do this a lot?
Well, frequently.
Frequently, huh?
When I'm all dressed up, especially.
Oh, yeah? Well, I didn't know you played basketball. Let's see here. So can you show us a few things? How about showing us how you dribble, huh?
Okay.
Okay.
Wow, Eleanor, that is great.
Okay.
I show you a slam now?
Yeah, why don't you show us a slam, Eleanor?
All right.
That was great, Eleanor. Really, we really appreciate you giving us the time and showing us some of your basketball moves.
Well, it was fun to do, and really, would you like to have me show you some more reverse swing?
Oh, that's okay, but thanks a lot. Thanks again, Eleanor.